Hi, my name is Pete, and this is my story. As far as I know, I'm 20% Japanese, 50% black from the waist down, 25% Cherokee in my hair, and 5% Irish in my left eye. And if you didn't believe anything I just said, then I'm definitely 100% black. I started living here in Long Beach and moved to the Valley for college at Cal State Northridge, but I'm originally from Washington, D.C., aka Chocolate City. I have a pretty big family, 4 uncles, 6 aunts, a lot of cousins, a very Christian-like family that was raised in a church for most part. I think that's where my family's community resides within a church. I think the greatest moment of belonging to the nation, to be specific, for my family would be Barack Obama becoming president in 2008. And I know that might sound pretty cliche for those watching, but for my family and other African Americans, it was somewhat of a big deal. I'm sure everyone in school has heard, teachers use that same line. You can do anything you want. You can even become president of the United States. And for a black person back in the day to have such a thought was kind of ridiculous, unfortunately. But sure enough, that day arrived when it became true. It was such a proud moment to see because many blacks living through those times of segregation and being discriminated against would have never imagined such a thing. And that gave African Americans hope that anything is possible. And slowly but surely, change is happening where people are earning more privileges that weren't available years before. My family really didn't speak much of those tough times for blacks in the day. I'm sure that they went through it, but they never really mentioned it much in front of me. But my dad was a different story. Although a much peaceful man now, when I was younger, I could sense there was still rage within him, a lot of anger and resentment. He always taught me things like to watch out for those in your school and people in the store, people in power, like police officers that would try and pick on you. At the time, I didn't understand why he assumed those things. But I do recall a time where it was my father, cousin and I, we were driving back from a family event when we were a few blocks away from the house, and we noticed that the cops were behind us, following us. They didn't have any sirens or lights on, but my dad, he didn't stop. I asked him, I was like, Dad, why aren't you stopping? The cops are behind us, they're following us. But he didn't say anything, kept driving. And sure enough, the cops, they turned on their lights, but we were already a few blocks away. But then eventually he stopped too. The cops rushed up, yelling, telling us to put our hands over our head, even me, at the age of 11 or 12. Why didn't you stop? Didn't you see our lights? What's wrong with you? They yelled at my dad, through the window. I remember just being so scared and terrified. But the officers, they walked around the car, flashed their lights through the window, and, eventually they just drove off. I remember when they left, I asked my dad, I was like, Dad, why didn't you stop? Didn't you see their lights? And he just turned to me and looked at me and said, I wanted to be in an area where there were lights and people could see us just in case. Again, I didn't know what that meant at the time, but growing up, I finally figured it out. And I figured why there was so much anger with them. My dad, he's black, very strong guy. He was tall, 6'4", and where he was raised, Long Beach, people wanted to pick a fight with him always. And not just whites, blacks too. Now, I couldn't relate to him because growing up in D.C., I've never experienced that kind of prejudice from anyone. Growing up, the part of town or area I lived in was majority black, hence the name Chocolate City. And if I were ever to be picked on, it was because I was, a geek or nerd or whitewashed, not from the color of my skin. It wasn't until I moved out here into California that I began to fully understand where he was coming from. I began to get dirty looks from Latinos back in Long Beach who thought I was a gangbanger. I had people in the store following me, assuming that I'm going to shoplift. And, especially now at Northridge, every now and then I get a officer stopping me, questioning me like I'm some type of criminal. As far as knowing where I belong to the nation or in my community, I honestly don't know the answer to that. It's hard for me to have that feeling when even your own kind or group doesn't really consider you a part of them. And having your family across the nation doesn't help either. It's also tough being in an area that's mostly dominated by whites, Asian, Latinos, which is nothing wrong with that. You know, I love the culture, you know, experiencing new things, but it sucks when you go to these events, you know, and you can kind of feel that vibe, you know, that what is he doing here? You know, he doesn't belong. Still, I love my friends. I love the diversity and love being involved in, again, different cultures and experiencing new things. I hope that someday I can find a spot where I truly do belong and I can answer that question to where I belong within a nation or my community.